you so much, Sev. It's actually quite, thank you. It's actually quite strange when someone reads your bio because you forget how old you are, actually, until they remind you. Well, having worked in the sector for more than 25 years, it's actually closer to 30 now. So if you add that up with a university degree, you'd know roughly how old I am. So thank you so much, Sev, for being such a gracious facilitator and introducer of my background and wonderful friend of our work. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. They've cared for this land since time immemorial, and I commit myself personally to a future with reconciliation and renewal at its heart. I want to thank Ahmed and your team for inviting me to be along tonight. I have been here before and I've enjoyed it. This is probably my third time. And like Mary said, you know, it's that, and I think somebody actually on the DVD said, it's that opportunity for people who we live everyday lives just to be together and actually get to know each other and see each other as people first and foremost. So it's a really amazing thing that you're doing, and thank you so much, and to the Foundation. Of course, it's wonderful to be here with Peter, who I've watched over the years from afar, and then a little bit closer in the last couple of years. And obviously, Sev, you know, both very long-standing leaders in advancing the benefits of diversity and, of course, human rights and the maintenance of human rights in Australia, and very strong advocates in their own way, which we absolutely appreciate, and I'm sure you do too. As Sev has kindly shared already, you know who I am. You know a bit about what I do. At SSI, I've done that for about 4 years. So for 4 years, I've held the position for the first time where the organisation has said we want to actually put some resources to working better with our stakeholders, our members, and with government. And it's been a fantastic ride for the last 4 years. I guess, you know, the personal, I don't know where Sev got the personal from, but it's lovely that you did. I'm obviously a child of you know, post-war migrants, born in Australia, but my parents have come from very rural backgrounds in Greece with, you know, very little education, you know, probably year 1 and year 2, but always, particularly my dad, with a very keen interest in educating himself about the world around him, about history and about politics. And I think that that's driven my passion for why I'm here today and why I've built the life that I've built. So it's important for you to sort of understand a little bit about me and what kind of motivates me to be here. I started in the work at a time when we worked very closely with government. So the community sector worked very closely with government. And Sev talked about some of the committees that I've sat on very early in my career, my 20s and 30s. And they were very robust meetings that really set fantastic social policy frameworks, which then obviously impacted positively on the services that we provide to people and how they engage with our services and how they're part of our services. So it was a fantastic time. I also managed a migrant resource centre for 14 years in southwestern Sydney, and that was an absolute joy. So I guess it's against that backdrop that I share my learning with you tonight. Something about SSI, I guess it's important, as Sev pointed out, just to say that that's a bit about who we are. I don't read screens for verbatim, but as Sev said, you know, I'm very proud to say that I was a founding member of SSI, or the Migrant Resource Centre Association. So I was a manager of a migrant resource centre, and with my colleagues, we got together and said, you know, we want to look at the future, we want to look at opportunities, we want to be optimistic, and we want to be strategic about what the future for the multicultural and settlement sector and communities looks like. And we founded SSI about 17 years ago. What started as a visionary response to foreseeable changes in how services were going to be contracted and delivered, we preempted the move to establish a larger scale organisation that could manage larger scale contracts, because we could see that government was moving away from funding smaller and medium-sized organisations, and they really wanted to consolidate their engagement and have less contract management responsibility. And we saw that very early, and we thought, well, how do we actually respond to this as an opportunity? And we really were also motivated by wanting to ensure that migrants and migrant communities maintained agency and voice and had some power at the table going forward where decisions were going to be made. And that's kind of how we got to today as an organisation. We've had sort of 2 iterations, and the first one wasn't as successful as the second one, but we learnt a lot from phase 1, and we're now on to phase 2. We're obviously, as Sev said, a very large NGO now. We've got over 700 staff and volunteers. We run programs in refugee and general settlement, employment, disability support, youth, multicultural out-of-home care. We also support refugees to start their small businesses. And more recently, we became, with our member organisations, a disability employment provider. I think what's interesting about our experience is that we've been able to both be a service provider, so supporting communities alongside communities, but also managing contracts that support other organisations to do that work. And one of our partners is in the room, Anthony from Advanced Diversity Services, who in that arrangement, we lead the contract and Anthony's organisation does all of the delivery at the local and regional level. So we have quite an adaptable approach depending on what's needed by the community and what government would like to see happen. That's a little bit about our impact. So in 2016-17, we're working on an update for this, and I can get that to Ahmed when it's ready, but we sort of say, most years there's about 10,000 plus refugees that we support. I mean, probably 8 to 10 that year was extraordinary with the increasing numbers. You see a little bit there about the refugee businesses that we helped establish, the number of people that got into employment. It's just a nice summary that gives people like yourself and others a bit of a sense of the range. An area that we're very proud of, which is very close to communities in the arts and cultural space. We have found over the years that multicultural arts and culture is not as much of a priority in terms of funding that's allocated. And we've made a very strong effort to actually subsidise that work ourselves, and so we've done a lot more in the arts and culture space to use that as a medium for people that are very new to Australia to stay connected to their culture, but also to share their culture in their new environment, and that's been an area of great pride. And on the first week in November, we've got a big New Beginnings Arts and Culture Festival in Darling Harbour, so I'll give that a bit of a plug. We do that every year. So I just wanted to also let you know that very recently we're very excited and very relevant in terms of the topic tonight. We extended our refugee humanitarian services into regional New South Wales, and we're now providing services in Armidale and the North Coast. I think it's important for us to note that for us, our successful service delivery is fuelled by bringing diverse minds to the table, including expert practitioners, community leaders and strategists, partners and collaborators, to assess the policy trends and the government priorities and the needs in order to be able to respond. They're kind of our drivers. What I take away, I guess, from all the years that I've worked in the settlement sector is that we are very mindful that we cannot do what we do without others working with us. It's just impossible to do what we do without others working with us. SSI was founded on that basis and with that understanding, and we're stronger for it. What I've also learnt is that community and government must be in honest and transparent dialogue and work together with mutual respect. It can't be a one-way relationship. It has to continue to be a two-way relationship, and I think that's when you get the best results. That partnerships based on shared values are often more successful regardless of what sector an organisation comes from, be it corporate, community or government. I've been in a lot of situations where I've seen greater synergies and greater outcomes for clients when I work with someone who shares the same values as me, even if they're not from the same sector or from the same cultural background or any of the other things that you might think when you first meet somebody. And I say that not that we can't do it alone, we probably can, but we choose as an organisation not to. We actually prefer not to. We actually prefer very consciously and mindfully to work with others, to add to their work and for others to add to our own. I think on honest and transparent dialogue with government, I'd be interested to see what Peter thinks. I say that, from our point of view, we can say with experience that you get the best service delivery responses when you work to a mutually designed policy framework that is informed by those at the coalface and by those who seek our services and our support. That is the community itself. It's not just me as a professional, it's not just me with 30 years experience, But having the people that we support part of the conversation makes for a better settlement experience. What we're finding is that with both federal and state governments moving to devolve service delivery more and more, the authenticity and honesty of our relationships and our communication with government and with one another is imperative. And by that I mean, for example, if you take out of home care, more and more state governments are moving away from caring for children directly. So if they're going to be devolving that service delivery to us and we take on that responsibility, taking a very informed approach and with a very responsible approach, we need to be in continuous dialogue because that responsibility is being devolved to us. I think it's very safe to say that partnerships are part of SSI's DNA. It is natural and also sensible for us to be in partnership with people and organisations who, as I said, share our values. And I feel very fortunate to be part of a sector where there are so many people and so many organisations that share our values. And I actually have great optimism for the future because I think that's actually on the increase, particularly as Peter often points out within the corporate world. That is actually shifting even more. I just wanted to, on the topic of tonight, just share two examples with you around government and community working together to advance refugee settlement in New South Wales. And having been an ex-councillor, obviously local government is extremely close to my heart, and I know Susanna's here from the City of Sydney, so she'll like this. Local government is the level of government that's closest to the people, probably the level of government that has greatest affinity to community or to people like me. And I just want to talk a little bit about Armidale. I said before that we have recently moved into the Armidale area, and so I just want to share this one with you. Recently, Armidale became a designated regional refugee location, and I haven't seen one of those for at least 10 or 11 years. So that is where a federal government actually says we want this particular area to be a hotspot in terms of newly arrived refugees. And we'll put resources to making that happen. Previous to moving into Armidale, we had absolutely no relationship with the council. We needed to establish meaningful connections and gear up for clients in a very short period of time. Since then, we've developed what can only be described as a robust, respectful and collegial relationship driven by the best interests of our community and their community, even more importantly. From the start, we acknowledged that they were a key stakeholder for us. They were an owner of community wisdom and they were a civic leader. And they're extremely embedded in their community, and regional councils probably even more so. Some of them actually, deliver services as well. So it's a very different relationship in a regional area. Since then, council staff have actually come along to welcome new refugees at the airport, at Armidale Airport. They've hosted morning teas for newcomers. They've allowed us to come into closed councillor workshops and brief them on what's happening and who's coming and where are they from, what are their needs and what kind of feedback are they getting. We've been able to actually brief the Mayor face-to-face on a regular basis. Those things we would never have got happening had we not invested in that relationship and had they not been keen to invest in that relationship. So there you had an amazing Mayor, a fantastic team of staff particularly, who were really excited about the people that were coming into their community. So it was fertile ground and it's been a joy, and I know our community engagement team has really, really enjoyed it. I think we know that the health of our relationships is essential to the successful settlement of newcomers in Armidale, and this has always been front of mind for us. And that's, I guess, in Armidale even more because you have a situation where the host community really wanted this to happen. They actually put the pressure on to make it happen of their federal members, and so it was really important that we respected that, and the community is and will be stronger for it. In the New South Wales government domain, I know Peter will probably talk a little bit about this and I won't steal your thunder, but the Refugee Employment Support Program is a direct result of the relationship between the New South Wales government, our organisation and other community organisations. I'll just speak about that from the point of view of a community organisation, and I say this very, very genuinely, not because Peter's here, but from the start of Peter's appointment in his role as Refugee Coordinator General, the community was invited into a conversation, right? Invited into a piece of important work and an opportunity to influence meaningfully and in shaping what the New South Wales government was going to do through what Peter later established, and we'll probably talk about, the Joint Partnership Working Group. That group was the coming together of community and government agencies. And when Sev talked about a committee I sat on, which was the New South Wales Interdepartmental Committee for Migrant Settlement, that was the last time we had that committee. Yeah. In 1990, might have been 1998 or something like that, don't quote me. And so for me, it was extraordinary to see that finally these kinds of dialogues were going to be happening again in a meaningful way with community at the table. And I can say that from first-hand experience. It had been a very, very long time, Peter. The New South Wales government had made a bold commitment to take its share of the extra 20,000 people from Syria, and Peter's work would advance this commitment. Based on Peter's open approach and the leadership of the then Premier Baird, from SSI's viewpoint, we knew from the start that we were going to be committed to being engaged, and we were going to take very much a goodwill approach. We shared our IP, we shared service and policy information without fear or favour, as did many of our community sector colleagues and community leaders. The end result was the injection of, how much was it, Peter? 146?
Yeah, 146.
146 million. I've got a pretty good memory.
Yeah.
For settlement in the state budget, and it was probably a couple of budget cycles ago now. A range of new programs earmarked and additional resources for both government and community organisations. And I can tell you that for me, that was an extraordinary outcome in the financial climate that we find ourselves in human services. And, you know, the RESP, the Refugee Employment Program, support program, was funded through a tender process as part of that funding increase. And it's had extraordinary results. One of the greatest aspects of the Refugee Employment Support Program itself is that it enhances the value that the not-for-profit sector brings to that kind of program, being the bridge between community and government, the bridge between employers and community, the bridge between industry and community, and those that are very new arrived who are seeking an employment pathway. The collaboration in the RESP is key for the successful development of the program itself. Without, say, for example, the active partnership between us and the New South Wales Government, PETA, the sector, the joint partnership, I doubt very much that this program would have been funded to positively contribute to people's settlement and to help them get that job that they really, really need to get started in Australia. I know that Peter's work is what has developed that possibility. I just wanted to close by saying that I'm a firm believer that deep and meaningful relationships bring wonderful collaborations. They help grow broad, resourceful networks in our community, and they deliver better outcomes for organisations and for our community in the end. And ultimately, that's the most important thing, and it's a thing that drives us. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to listening to Peter and the dialogue later.
Well, thank you very much, Esther. You've been clearly a good message messenger. Quite often when I go to this kind of meetings, when you have on one hand community representatives, on the other hand government representative, you have a bit of a combat. You have a combat of ideas, and not only of it. We still don't know what Peter will say, but at least one side was quite good, and in a way I'm quite proud living in New South Wales and seeing the government commitment to refugees. I was myself a refugee in 1975, arriving to Villawood Reception at this stage. It was a place, and now, it was called Villawood Reception. I still have fond memories of it because we could learn English, we could get access to childcare, and we could have a just normal beginning. And after 2 years in Germany, after we escaped from Poland and had different experiences, it was really like coming to paradise. But it's also interesting what we are talking about Armidale. I spent in Armidale 4 years. From Villawood here, we went to Armidale. I've got a PhD scholarship there. And what's interesting was there was plenty of settlers who came to Armidale just after the Second World War, who settled there, who established roots, who established very good businesses. But when we arrived there, we were possibly the only newcomers over the last 10 years to that place. And on one hand, it was very good because there was not too many Poles around, so we could speak Polish. There were some Russians, some Ukrainians here, and a few Poles. But basically, you had to learn English, and it was easier when you didn't have too much of your own. But it's, I think, very good to see government rediscovering regional areas, especially areas where there is work, where there is a potential, and trying to help people to go there. But now our second speaker is Professor Peter Shergold, AC, and he represents the government part of the Ledger. He is the New South Wales Coordinator General, what an old-fashionable name, for refugee resettlement. It means he's a person who is responsible for coordination of all refugee settlement services, policies across government, across non-government sector, and also corporate sector, because it's also quite important to deliver some jobs. Professor Shergold is also Chancellor of Western Sydney University, where I work. And I know Peter is well known to most of you, so possibly I should stop my introduction just now. But perhaps allow me to say a few more things. You know, it's got to be a balance. Looking back, Peter worked for the last 2 decades for 4 prime ministers and 8 ministers in both Labour and coalition governments. I first met Peter, I think it was 85, when I was in the US on Harkness. We met in Pennsylvania at the University over there. Then I met him when he was asked by Hawke government to establish the Office of Multicultural Affairs in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And I was lucky enough to be one of people appointed there. And I must say, his work in the Office of Multicultural Affairs delivered a golden era for multicultural Australia. It's really, really difficult to believe how much it was done during that time, including drafting of a national agenda for multicultural Australia and putting a range of policies and programs which are still in place and impacting on Australia. I think Peter was the most important job, but then, of course, he moved to ATSIC, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. He headed it, then he became Public Service Commissioner. Then he headed a number of departments, including, I think, education and employment. And then in 2003, Peter was appointed as Australia's most senior public servant, the Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet in Canberra. And he held that position for 5 years or a bit more. I think possibly nobody after you held that position that long.
No Prime Minister.
Well, you see, Peter is also very humble, yes. But I checked who is who for his personal hobbies, but none were recorded over there. But I'm pleased to say that Peter was born in England and he migrated to Australia in '72, so he's one of us. Please join me in giving Professor Shergold a warm welcome.